So, good evening. Welcome to the Friday Study Circle, and thank you so much for joining us. As is, I usually say that, when I read something myself, I'm usually quite restrictive. I'm reading one book or like I'm contemplating on one thought. But I find the circle really beautiful because I'm exposed to so much more. So, thank you for this opportunity. Here we discuss, the text of mainly Mother and Sri Aurobindo, but anything that you have read from any master or mystic, anything for reflection or questioning is and so today I'll request Sarda ji to start with anything she has read this week, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, it is a question answer. The starting word is Sweet Mother. How can one feel the divine presence constantly? So, shall I start? Hello?
Yeah, just give me 1 second. Let me just.
Sure. When you're ready, please tell me.
Yes, I'm ready. Now you can start.
Yeah. So somebody is asking, Mother, Sweet Mother, how can one feel the divine presence constantly? Mother is answering, why not? But how can one do it? But I am asking why one should not feel it. Instead of asking the question, how to feel it, I ask the question, what do you do that you don't feel it? There is no reason not to feel the divine presence. Once you have felt it, even once, you should be capable of feeling it always, for it is there. It is a fact. It is only our ignorance which makes us unaware of it. But if we become conscious, why should we not always be conscious? Why forget something one has learnt? When one has had the experience, why forget it? It is simply a bad habit. That's all. Yeah, it's such a long answer, but I found this one very, very interesting because, we always talk about awareness. Monica always says, being aware of being aware. See, so many times we tend to forget who we are and we forget about the divine presence within us. I felt it very, very interesting. So it was, so many times when we have very good experience, when we have, some miracle happens, that time we feel, oh, Mother saved me, Mother does this, Mother did this, all that blah, blah, will start. But after some time, when some disturbance comes, that time we forget, ayo, Mother, I'm not able to come out of this problem. I was relating myself with this question, so which was very, very interesting. So thought of sharing. And another thing, Taru, is so it can be of any book, right? For the weekly.
Yes, anything that you've read, any book, and even any master or mystic, because honestly, they're all saying the same thing. Yeah, like like maybe not understand it like that, but if we get into the depths, everybody's saying the same thing. So anything is welcome that you want us to reflect on together, or anything you found beautiful like this one, that you would want others to feel the beauty too, in addition to being reminded again and again.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the first time I'm reading from the works of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo. I have the opportunity. Otherwise, I always read the experiences or from disciples.
Yeah.
I used to read those type of books. So this is a kind of opening to me to read directly, the mothers and masters teaching, which is very, very beautiful. I felt this one was very, very nice and very apt for me, at least. So many times.
It's like a question that, anybody could ask, right? Like, the answer is so obvious, right? Like, it's so weird that we don't. And how, I really love the word that here when it says capable here, right?
Yeah,
Once you have felt it, even once, you should be capable of feeling it always. So it's like so beautiful, and I don't think there would be anybody here at least who would have not felt it. I mean, otherwise, I don't know if you would be here. And I keep forgetting it, right? Like you said, like, there's something that needs, I need a reminder, I need a push, right? And usually that reminder is pain, that reminder is suffering, right? That tells you when I'm in trouble. It's like even if a kid is playing, right? Like when my kid is playing, he's happy, he's like, he doesn't know where I am. But as soon as he gets hurt or there's any issue or any pain, he calls out, right?
Yeah.
Something about it that's why, it's such a, like we were discussing on Wednesday, it's like a blessing if you can see it, the pain in our life that helps us remember, the divine more.
Another thing which I related to this is one of my friend, she got, her husband got transferred to Pondicherry. So husband was not, really mother, he knew Mother and Sri Aurobindo, but the wife was very, my friend was very, very, great devotee of the mother. And they got transferred to Pondicherry. So she was very happy. Oh, I'm going to the mother's place and I'll be going to the ashram every day. I'll be sitting near the samadhi. So I'll be very happy. So they started looking for the admission for the kid and they didn't get what they wanted. So the husband said, you don't come. You be in Chennai only. I will only go, stay in Pondicherry. Every week I'll come. So that time she was saying, see, mother has made me come there. She was so happy when, before this all happened, as soon as he got transferred to Pondicherry, she was very happy. She was jumping. See, mother has called me finally. So after this admission thing happened, they couldn't go. I don't know why mother is doing like this. She was saying. Then I told, see, the same mother only. Mother only told you to come. The mother only is telling you not to come now. So we have to take it in that way, but which is, very difficult. Always. When things are favorable to us, we are very happy. When they are not very pleasant to our mind, we will not feel it, as you said. When the child gets hurt, it remembers like that. Yeah. But we do it the other way. When we are happy, we are happy. Oh, mother is doing everything for me. When we are not happy, we blame the mother or anybody, any god. Beautiful, no? We human beings are like this only.
One thing that stuck me when you were sharing, you said that when we think, when we feel that something is good for me, I'm happy. When I feel it's bad. But the truth is, that day I was listening to something from the Upanishads, and the speaker was saying that, God give me that strength to know what is good for me, right? Like, because honestly, what I feel is good for me is mostly not good for me. That is just a cycle of pain and happiness and pain and happiness. That's what I get attracted to. I usually don't get attracted to joy, right? Because for that, I'll have to take difficult steps. So I think knowing, even just feeling that in that thing because I don't even know what's good for me, how can I say mother is doing this to me or that to me, right? Like, so that's also something that one needs to aspire for, that give me that wisdom.
Yes, correct word.
What's good for me, yeah. So anybody who has anything to share on this beautiful small sharing, please, you can unmute. Yes, Jyotsna ji.
Actually, how I react to it would be that I would relate to it or react to it from a position of calm. Mother will not do anything to you that will make you blame her. If your faith is so strong enough that you know that she will never do anything like that to blame her ever, then automatically there comes a kind of an acceptance where you operate from a position of awareness. And once you operate from a position of awareness, sooner or later, I wouldn't say immediately, but I would say sooner or later, the answer as to why a certain event happened comes. That is 200% sure. You get the answer, but it takes its time. Until then, we cannot go on the blame path. We have to go into a path of calm acceptance and introspection where we look as to where am I slipping up? Was my response coming from a vital zone? Was it coming from a strong desire? Was my reaction incorrect? That is why I behaved in a particular way, like your particular friend who just blamed and said, I don't know why mother won't do. It will always be to your benefit, but maybe not at that point of time. You do not understand why it happened. So I have found that if the baggage you carry, if your backpack is enveloped by mother, automatically the blaming goes. It doesn't come, so one doesn't feel. I mean, that's how I took it, because I've had many instances in life where things did not happen according to what I wanted or the way I looked at it. And that is actually what taught me true surrender. It taught me surrender, because I knew that unless you do not surrender completely, it's not happening. Surrender always comes with acceptance. And we say, no, in Hindi there is a saying, कि सच हमेशा कड़वा होता है. And acceptance, to accept something which doesn't conform with your thinking, is very difficult. But she gives the strength. I've operated from that since a long time, and it has taught me that final path is you just go on offering and surrendering. Just go on surrendering. The path takes its own course, and accept it.
And I think one thing one that keeps coming to us, or right now me, is that one can sometimes mistakenly feel that surrendering is a one-time event, right? Like at times you hear people say, but I've already surrendered, and yet this happened, right? Or yet I did that. But like Josna ji was sharing, right? It's a constant practice. It's not, like they say, perfection has no end, right? And this is beyond the mind, because the mind wants an end. Similarly, it's not a one time, two time, 10,000 time thing, right? It's like a constant practice, because there is something in me which keeps taking it back, right? Which keeps wanting to be a doer. And every time you see that movement, I mean, of course, there must be a point where it stops, right? But just talking about, I don't know, speaking about myself, how can I say for all of us here? But that is a constant, as much as you can do. It's a process and a practice that has to be repeated, I don't know, unlimited number of times till it becomes you. Yeah. So, anyone else, anything on what has been shared so far, or any other thing that you would want to share with us today?
I was reading about the Godward emotions. Sri Aurobindo, the principle of yoga is to turn Godward all or any of the powers.
Yeah, got it.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
So, what we had been discussing, even this answer also I could find in this paragraph. So there are so many questions. Without asking the questions, it has been written actually. So only thing we have to realize and we have to understand the deep meaning of it actually. So I'll just read first. The principle of yoga is to turn Godward all or any of the powers of the human consciousness, so that through that activity of the being, there may be contact, relation, union. In the yoga of bhakti, it is the emotional nature that is made the instrument. Its main principle is to adopt some human relation between man and the divine being, by which, through the ever intenser flowing of the heart's emotions towards him, the human soul may at last be wedded to and grow one with him in passion of divine love. It is not ultimately the pure peace of oneness or the power and desireless will of oneness, but the ecstatic joy of of union, which the devotee seeks by his yoga. Every feeling that can make the heart ready for this ecstasy, the yoga admits. Everything that detracts from it must increasingly drop away as the strong union of love becomes closer and more perfect. So, Jasnaji was talking about towards oneness, surrendering. So, once what I was thinking, when this was being discussed, that once we are with him, with the divine, so divine is already there. There is nothing that divine is not there. Divine it is taken for granted. So I need not to prove anybody that come, I'll show you that I have got the divine, because it cannot be quantified, it cannot be seen, it cannot be felt. Like Brahma, we say, it is beyond our imagination and all this. But whatever we are doing, whatever we are thinking, so all is by the grace of that Almighty. Whatever actions we are taking is all by but even the Ramakrishna Paramahansa says, even the air is moving and the leaves are moving in the air of the trees. There is also the God's will, the divine will. It is not my will or I will. But what has happened is, because of our ego and there are so many other issues with the human being, we think differently. So that is that our ignorance. We are covered by the very thick quilt of ignorance, such that we are not in a position to see the light of it. Actually, once the light is there with me, so with the divine being, and so there is no difference actually. There is no question asked actually, and hardly there will be any questions coming out. The more so here it's a very beautiful word being used, that emotions towards him, the human soul may at last be wedded to. So wedding is taking place, and grow one with him in passion of divine love. So this divine love is the key word actually. The once we are having the divine love, so we are not doing something to satisfy our ego or something of this nature. The last sentence, it underlines every feeling that can make the heart ready for the ecstasy. The yoga admits everything that detracts from it must increasingly drop away as the strong union of love becomes closer and more perfect. So we have to have that divine love. That is to be that is the ecstasy. That is the ecstasy we have to have. Once we have that ecstasy and the divine love, I think the world will totally be changed in front of my eyes as an individual. So I'll be so engrossed in that I will not be able to see other than this anything else. I finished. Thank you.
This is speaking of Bhakti Yoga, na, Captain? This that he is describing is Bhakti Yoga.
This is the synthesis of yoga.
Yeah, it is.
The name
Bhakti
of the
Yoga.
chapter is the Godward Emotions.
Yes, it's.
Emotion in Bhakti Yoga, emotion is also playing a major role in Bhakti Yoga.
This is mainly Bhakti Yoga.
Yes. Bhakti.
In India, it is dominant.
Yes.
This is our route.
The Ramakrishna Paramahamsa also believed in this Bhakti Yoga. So
yes.
That is more relevant. He was telling that it becomes more practical.
Yes.
So,
but with the integral yoga, once you get onto the integral yoga path, which encompasses all,
yes,
it takes a different turn, and we, in fact, we in that integration, he explains it in the earlier chapters so clearly that you consciously understand why you are doing what.
Yes.
He starts with yoga of knowledge, jnana yoga, then he explains bhakti yoga in detail, then he goes to karma yoga in detail, and then he finally boils down to integral yoga, where he as a consolidate, he explains that you go through each, but you transcend each path to finally reach on the integral path and be able to see it as a composite, yes, which is very beautiful.
Yes. Even Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, means all types of yoga which is available. So that has been taken into consideration. So nobody will be out of syllabus actually. The syllabus is covered with all type of yogas. In my personal case, for a short time, I was practicing the Isha Yoga. Isha. So in that, the first lesson was by Jaggi Vasudev. So the first lesson was that it was in Australia. I was in Australia at that time, Sydney. So they say that Guruji has come, and so we went there. And in that is said that you have to sit down in a particular place, and all those took place. Then we are asked to breathe and follow the breathing. And while taking the breathing in, we have to say that I'm not the body. Just in the mind only, I have to think that. And when I'm breathing out, exhale. So at that time, I have to say that I am not even the mind. I am not the body. I am not even the mind. So I practiced for a couple of years. Then I saw that it has got a very good effect actually to start with. Because always I am recognizing myself or understanding myself with the body, or if not body alone, then the mind or intellect, with all this. But this is not that is not me actually. That is not me. So this I realized in my personal life So I thought I'll just share with you. So constantly, even now also, if I am breathing, so I am just thinking, breathing in and breathing out. So other day, Monica ji has said that, the practice in every day that we have to follow very consciously if we take the breathing, that I am breathing in consciously. I know that, yes, I am breathing in. Otherwise, we are so busy during the day and night, 24 hours, we do not know that whether we are taking breathing or not. Because it is automatically going on. I need not to do any effect. But to follow it itself is a concentration. It gives a lot of understanding once we see that I'm breathing in and what all things are taking place. The doctors will understand that breathing in has got a lot of other activities which are taking place inside the body. So we'll be surprised that who is doing all this. And once it is going out, breathing out also, that carbon dioxide is going on and all those things which are not required in the body, so that is going on. It is also on the excretion. So all those factors are there. It's a divine grace. More and more we come to know any subject or any topic in detail. We come to know that divine is there. Divine is permanently residing within us. Only thing, I am blind. I am totally blinded, so I am not in a position to see. That was the thing. Thank you.
Thank you. One thing that, amazes me again and again is how I believe that I'm the body and yet I'm so unaware of myself, right? Like for the bodily functions, even if you talk about, like you were saying, the breath, right? It's a fact that I don't pay attention, right? And when I pay attention, it becomes meditation, it becomes mindfulness. Like, I don't know. I say I'm the mind, and yet I don't know. I hear it so often that something came and it overtook me. Like, I don't know why I reacted that way. Like I say I'm the body, I don't know much about the body. I say I'm the mind, I don't know much about the mind. And yet I'm okay with that, right? Like I call myself an intelligent person. And yet these are facts of my life that I constantly, overlook. But anytime, say, if I just, if somebody hears that, okay, I don't listen to the news, like I haven't in, I don't know, 10, 15 years. So it's like the eyes are so wide open, and the sentence that I often hear is, but pata to hona chahiye. You should know all that is going on around you. And what surprises me is like, of course, you don't know much anything about yourself. And yet what I am worried about is knowing about everything that's happening outside of me. So this paradox I find sometimes frustrating, sometimes hilarious, sometimes, just wanted to share that it's weird that how this is our intelligence, that it's all just, focused here and there and nothing on myself most of the times. Like, yeah, just that. Yeah. Yeah. And again, this even Bhakti Yoga, it's amazing that anytime when we read anything about the Bhakti Yoga, just Meera comes in mind, right? Like comes to the forefront. Like the extent of her bhakti, I think, is a kind of, I don't know, it's such a big thing that I don't think there would be anybody who would not be thinking about Meera when we would be reading about that.
It was an epitome of Bhakti Yoga.
Yeah. And so universally, right? Like anybody would. Yeah. Once I was again hearing something, it was on Meera and like Bhagavad Gita and all. And somebody was asking about, the morality of things, that how morality is so important. And the guru was saying that, how mother says that there's divine law, right? Like there's a regular law, but beyond the state, there's divine law. So the person basically said that, Meera followed no kind of moral norms. And say, if we look at her mother-in-law, who was always, kind of telling her, okay, don't do this, don't do that, and kind of so surprised at what she's doing. Like, I don't know, like maybe 500 years now down the lane, nobody remembers the mother-in-law who wanted to follow all norms and moralities. And yet everybody knows Meera who followed none, right? Like how, again, that paradox of our lives, that what we think is good is actually bad. What we consider to be bad can actually be the reason for our liberation. Like how it just, as in, it helps to not form opinions, right? Like I think this is bad, this is not, and stuff. Like I think just knowing that I have no idea, and again, that surrender comes at whatever mother will do or whoever we believe in, right? Like a captain was sharing that there's, without even a leaf is not, and that's very common in our, especially in the Indian context, that it doesn't move. So just that I don't have to be that intelligent. It's, and like, yeah. So anybody on this or anybody else, please, anything else, please, you can unmute and go next. Thank you.
I read 2-3 interesting things, very short,
Yeah.
but interesting. And identification is the goal of yoga. Can one say that surrender is the first step and offering the second, right?
Yes, yes. Yes.
No. Some begin with an offering and end with surrender. It depends upon the character of each one. You may perhaps begin by having a feeling of inferiority. You are a little crushed by the grandeur of the divine, and then you feel a little freer and give with joy what you are. This is not always so. Many begin by self-giving. For them, the easiest movement is to give themselves. In the beginning, the giving is a little indefinite. Then one has to make an effort at times to surrender in detail. You can give yourself with much enthusiasm, but when at every step you have to submit to the higher will, the thing becomes more difficult. So does not offering imply surrender? The sadhak asks. So he says, does not offering imply surrender? He says, not at all. His mother says, you can give for the joy of giving without any idea of surrender. In a movement of enthusiasm, when you have glimpsed something infinitely higher than yourself, you can give yourself in an elan. But when it is a question of living, that every minute of surrendering oneself, every minute to the higher will, and when every minute requires this surrender, it is more difficult. But if by offering, you mean the integral offering of all your movements, all your activities, that is equivalent to surrender without implying it necessarily. But then it is no longer a movement made in enthusiasm. It is something which has to be realized in detail. One may say that any movement made in ardor and enthusiasm is relatively easy. That depends upon the intensity of the movement in you. But when it is a question of realizing one's aspiration every minute of one's life and in all its details, the enthusiasm recedes a little and one feels the difficulty. It's so profound because very often when you start the path, when I was reading this, I realized that we mix up offering as surrender. And you think that one offering, I could do it. But surrender is a continual conscious giving of all your parts, which is very different. Not different, but which is all consuming. And one has to give, which she has explained so beautifully. I would love to hear reflections of everyone.
It's actually this offering and surrender is normally thoroughly mixed up. Actually, it's thoroughly mixed up. It's a very difficult process to distinguish between this. But the surrendering, once it starts, so we start surrendering, and the process goes on as we elevate ourselves to that level. The things become, it is not easy actually to surrender. It is like a criminal is surrendering to the police, and so physically person is walking across and the surrendering takes place. Here, the surrendering, it's a very difficult terminology. There are so much of preparation, mental preparation, and God's grace, on the topmost, the God's grace is required. Actually, that surrender will take place. And it's not complete. I don't think that it's ever complete. Only some realized soul, they must have done that. Only the realized soul, they must have reached that. We do not know at what percentage we are. But that does not mean that we should not be beginning or thinking like that. So definitely we can elevate ourselves accordingly. This once surrendering to a certain extent we get, and then things, our life becomes very easy. The problems and day-to-day issues and all this, we can think them in a different light. That's when the surrender comes. And we start understanding the divine is everywhere, in every human being, every animal, or every creation of God. It's just fully this. Once this slowly that develops, then probably the surrender is working. I don't find anybody who is having enmity with me or something, and all that. Now, all those they get covered up. So slowly we understand that yes, maybe we are. I'm thinking to surrender. I'm thinking to surrender. And offering, like straightway it comes to the mind, like in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, sloka 22, that in Ramakrishna Mission, while eating lunch or dinner, they uttered this mantra: Om Brahmarpanang Brahma, Ovid Brahmagno Brahmana Hutam, Brahmaiva Tenagantabhang, Brahma Karma Samadhina. Means that everything you are offering in this Homa is going on. Homam. In that homam, you are offering that ghee. That ghee is offered to the God, and the person who is offering, he is also Brahma. And the container with is holding that ghee, the butter, that is also Brahma. So in Sarvang Kallidam Brahma, in this chapter, it says that everything is Brahma only. That there is nothing which is left out of that Brahma. So that means that offering is also it has got a very deep meaning. So like surrender, this is a big chapter actually. There are a lot of preparation required to offer something. If I offer something to God, just physically I'll take some sweets and give it to Modak. Ganesha loves Modak, so I'll buy some Modak and give it to God. So my offering is over. So this is just our physical offering. And this offering here, what we are talking about, this offering is entirely different than this physical offering. Actually. So then maybe at some level there will be a close relationship between the offering and surrendering. Because you can, the food which we are taking, so we say that the sun has given the light. Because of the light only that vegetable or whatever maybe has grown. So there are so much of energy God has put inside the food material, and that food material I am eating and I am surviving on that. So that is why this offering, Brahma offering, is done before this mantra is being uttered. So this offering. So here, maybe we say that yes, once we surrender everything to God, so that's a different subject altogether. And at the same time, this offering is also one of the very huge subject or topic. What I understand. Thank you.
I think for me, what stood out was that how, it's like how it cannot be occasional, right? Like how if it's occasional, it just means to an end, right? Like I see a problem occasionally and I say, oh, mother, I can't handle it. You take it. It's like, and I think we have discussed this several times, and yet every time it feels new. But offering it, for me, it feels that I am something, and mother, of course, she is something, and I have something that I can't handle, and I am offering it to her, right? Like I am there in surrender. Like, there's more of me. Sorry, not in surrender, but in offering, I meant that I cannot handle it, so I'm giving it to you. But in surrender, for me, I don't know, it feels that I know nothing, I am nothing, and here, it's like, how Kabir says that jo sar kat sakta, sheesh, they, and then you enter. That is kind of a thing that I am cutting myself. Like I say, I'm nothing and I am coming to you. But if it's just on occasions, if it's just when I have issues, then it's more of just a fancy of me, right? Like I say I'm surrendering, I say I'm offering, but how mother says that then it's just enthusiasm, you're doing something in that. It has to be moment to moment, moment to moment. And if it's not, there's a long way to go. And we see that at least we know the way. So that part really stood out for me in this again and again. The integral offering of all your movements, all your, that is equivalent to surrender without implying it's necessarily. It's not just, something happened. It's not, I didn't say enthusiasm or anything. Like it's not a poke and I did it. It is how I have begun to live. Yeah. And even this is so interesting. Once one begins to live in the presence of the divine, one does not question any longer, right? Like there's nothing.
I did not take this question because the answer was very long, but I took the next one. What is the difference between aspiration and demand? It comes after that.
Okay,
Yeah. Very nice it is. She's answered it. She's explained it very nicely.
Is there anybody who would first want to comment on what was just read? So we can do that. Otherwise, we can go to, yes, Sandeep.
Yes, thanks, Tharuji. Thanks, everyone. This is the first time I was just listening. It was so nice. Tharuji, the concept is really nice, actually. When I was discussing with you, could you suggest any theme? Then this theme actually is, more interactive, and I find it very interesting. Thank you. Gratitude to the Divine Mother. Will not take much time. I was not prepared, but still something is coming into my mind. Yeah, mostly offering. When we say, Mother has also clearly, segregated it. There is a different phrase, and I think, another volume it is there. So, what I understand is offering is more of a, as we, in the way we are currently, right, to the way we in an ordinary consciousness, and we are trying, for our, best to reach to a higher consciousness. For us, it is always, it's an attitude. Offering is an attitude. Offering is a practice. Okay, when we mean practice, as rightly said by Taruji also, that if I have something, I am feeling like, offer it to, voluntarily to the mother, or to someone, who can take care about it, right, of the, to the divine, let's say. So that is more of a practice perspective. But when this practice because reach a highest level, it is not just my, any other being, my mind, my mind, very vital, or my physical, or anything, or any part of my being, it is complete and it is integral. Then it becomes, it's an attitude, it becomes, and that is what surrender would be. Sri Aurobindo's yoga is also started from surrender, and it ends in surrender. So by how we can start this, the offering is, we always, remember and offer, a kind of statement. We always, listen. So what is that? Whenever, whenever I feel that I am different from the divine, then until and up to that point, always whatever I have, I have to keep offering. The best offering would be the self offering. Okay, but this offering, one day, gradually it becomes an attitude, and that will become surrender. Okay, so the best example of surrender is, highest level of love, divine love is, she was mentioning Meera. I would say it would be, Radha. So Radha's prayer we always listen, right? Whatever you do for me, I don't have any my agenda. It's your agenda. So whatever I will follow, it's you. You have to decide whether I live or I die, whether I give the suffering or pleasure, whatever. It's whatever, but you choose me for that. So that is what, highest level of surrender what Radha was having, right? So she is our role model, in terms of surrender when we're discussing. So these are the few of the thoughts, Taruji. Thanks everyone for letting me in. Gratitude to the Divine Mother.
Yes, thank you. I'll just share Radha's prayers. I remember the first time I read it, it was just like, wow. So now that you have mentioned it, it's a perfect time to just look at it again and feel the joy. Would you like to read it since you have mentioned it for all of us?
Sure, Taruji.
You can just call me Taru. I request you.
Okay. Radha's prayer by the Mother. O thou, whom at first sight I knew, for the Lord of my being and my God, receive my offering. Thine are all my thoughts, all my emotions, all the sentiment of my heart, all my sensations, all the movements of my life, each cell of my body, each drop of my blood. I am absolutely and altogether thine without reserve. What thou wilt for me, that I shall be. Whether thou choosest for me life or death, happiness or sorrow, pleasure or suffering, all that comes to me from thee will be welcome. Each one of thy gifts will be always for me a gift divine, bringing with it the supreme felicity.
Thank you. it's just amazing how expansive this is, right? Like just even reading something like this, that each cell of my body, each drop of my blood, I'm yours. Like just to say those words, I might not even mean it, but just the words have such a expanding effect that it's just wonderful. Jyotsna ji, we'll take the next one now.
What is the difference between aspiration? Yeah. I'll read the main ones. What is the difference between aspiration and a demand? When you have experienced both, you can easily make the distinction. In aspiration, there is what I might call an unselfish flame, which is not present in desire. Your aspiration is not a turning back upon self. Desire is always a turning back upon oneself. From the purely psychological point of view, aspiration is a self-giving always, while desire is always something which one draws to oneself. Aspiration is something which gives itself, not necessarily in the form of thought, but in the movement, in the vibration, in the vital impulse. True aspiration does not come from the head. Even when it is formulated by a thought, it springs up like a flame from the heart. I do not know if you have read the articles of Sri Aurobindo. The article Sri Aurobindo has written on the Vedas. He explains somewhere that these hymns were not written with the mind. They were not, as one thinks, prayers, but the expression of an aspiration, which was an impulse like a flame coming from the heart, though it is not the heart, but the psychological center of the being, to use the exact words. They were not thought out words, were not set to experiences. The experience came wholly formulated with the precise, exact, inevitable words. They could not be changed. This is the very nature of aspiration. You do not seek to formulate it. It springs up from you like a ready flame. And if there are words, sometimes there aren't any, they cannot be changed. You cannot replace one word by another. Every word is just the apt one. When the aspiration is formulated, this is done categorically, absolutely, without any possibility of change. And it is always something that springs up and gives itself, whereas the very nature of desire is to pull things to oneself. The essential difference between love in aspiration and love in desire is that love in aspiration gives itself entirely and asks nothing in return. It does not claim anything, whereas love in desire gives itself as little as possible, asks as much as possible. It pulls things to itself and always makes demands. And so the sadhak, in response to this, says aspiration always gives joy, doesn't it? And rather a feeling of plenitude. Joy is a misleading word. A feeling of plenitude, of force, of an inner flame which fills you. Aspiration can give you joy, but a very special joy which has no excitement in it. I connected with this very strongly because one sometimes needs clarification of one's own thought process, and Mother explains it so explicitly and so beautifully that there is no doubt left, and then you can connect and relate your feelings, what you felt, to what is being said. And you know, yes, that was it. Yes, then was it. At that time it was like that.
This is absolutely beautiful. And I think it's like, it's so amazing that how we are discussing something else. And yet, when the next thing comes, it feels that this is exactly what we were talking about, right? Like the joy that we were talking about right now, it's exactly here. You know, that expansion that I was talking about, I think that's what I wanted to say. And yet, to actually read it, put, you know, when it's put so simply, it just amazes you, right? That yes, I wanted to say this, but I didn't know how. And there it is right in front of you.
This happens very often on Friday study circle, where we all generally have rallied around a similar subject, and you know, in different aspects of the same thing, they coalesce and come together. And you know, it's happened many times, and then we say, oh, but I was also reading the same thing. And then captain says, I was also reading. Chitradi says the same thing. So it's mind-boggling sometimes.
This is very beautiful, very, very, very beautifully worded what you've shared today. You know how the Vedas, you know, they say that they are alive, right? Like they are not words, they're actually live. That's so, and not written with the mind, right? Because I feel the mind is the highest, right? And yet, again and again, I see it's not, so it's above the mind. These are not thought out. You know, this, I just wanted to share a personal experience when I was reading this. Just when I had thought about starting the Harmony Circle, you know, close to, I think, 1.5 years back now, how time flies. I didn't know whether, first of all, I should. And yet there was, you know, this thing that just, you know, sprung up in me that maybe something like this would be nice, where, because sessions are, you know, usually somebody speaking and somebody's listening, right? But circles, I personally find them more beautiful because everybody is equal, right? Because it's just, I don't know, I find it more expansive. So I, you know, kind of prayed to Mother that I want to, you know, this is coming to me, and yet I don't know how to do it. Like, what should be the topic? Like, that was something that I prayed, you know, during the day and while sleeping also. That was my thing, that I don't know how to go about it. And just, you know, how it says, like, it's not thought out, right? That's what it said here, not written with the mind. It's a prayer, it's an impulse. These were not thought out words. So similar to that, you know, I had a dream-like stage that night in which it's like I was lying down and, you know, like a snake keeps leaving his skin. These words, you know, the first topic of the Harmony Circle was, I am more than my circumstances. So in that dream, I felt, you know, the presence of the Mother very strongly, and my body was leaving, you know, the shell of my body, like my skin was, it kept coming out like the snake. And on that, these words were written, that I am more than my circumstances. And repeatedly, like it just kept coming again and again and again. And it was really, you know, like there was no if and but about it then. And the next day I drafted the poster, and that's how it got started. And but just like how we've all seen it, right? We have all experienced things. How Sarda ji has, you know, in the first sharing she did, that once you have experienced it, you're capable of experiencing it each and every moment. And yet, if, this remembrance for me is like 10 times a day or 50 times a day, I can do better. I can do better, right? Like, and how mother says, you turn your back. I am always here. So we should stop taking that for granted and, be more and more and more with her, because we are capable of that. And I think personally, that is also the beauty of having those experiences, because, the way you were able to be with her so intimately, whenever you think of that experience, that whole honest of that oneness is there, right? So I think one needs to go back to that moment till it becomes natural again and again, so that one can feel that constantly, that yes, I am with the mother, I am with the mother. Yeah. Anybody, please, I've spoken too much. If you have anything on this beautiful sharing, again, that we did. So the last, this was, what is the difference between aspiration and demand? So Josna ji, this is, did you have anything more after this in case there's nobody?
When I read aspiration always gives joy, doesn't it? And I was reading that it gives you a feeling of plenitude. There is a kind of a satiety which comes in you. There's a kind of like mother says, plenitude. There's a kind of a fullness which encompasses you when you aspire. It's not the spurts of joy which we feel when they come from the vital. We get spikes and spurts of joy and desire and they jump. No, this is a very steady feeling where you just feel full of yourself, of whatever you have aspired for. So that's why those 3 lines I read, because they struck home that it is a different feeling. Only we have to remain calm to get it. And if we don't, then we miss it.
How it's like, I again read this example somewhere that, when you want water and the water levels have dropped, when there's a boring and you need to pull water. So what do? You put some water and it pulls the water, right? So again, having experienced this in my life so often, that desire just leads to desire, right? Like it just wants more and more and more. Like I was in my in-laws place like last couple of weeks, and there's a very strong focus on food, like very, very, very strong. In my home where I grew up, it was just like, you eat because it's important for living, it gives you energy. It's not about, every meal is a celebration, and both has their beauty. But I get, it's like I find it hard to relate, but I was very clearly seeing this in me, that when I'm full, I wanted to put more in the body. If I've had a very elaborate meal, something in me would say, oh, and now where is the cookie, or where is the, like, what after this? And when normally it's like, it's not that at all. I don't think about food, meal done, over. So this thing about desire, that it just wants more, and here, where it was shared, that it's just in itself complete. You feel it and that's it, right? Like the beauty that it gives, the fullness that it gives, it doesn't want more. Shows that the beauty in it, right? Like just this feeling that you can so clearly see, if you're even a little bit vigilant, shows what it's about. And yeah. And the equanimity, that you were talking about, I actually today wanted to share that only. I'll quickly do, although we are running out of time a bit. Again, it's not something that we haven't heard so many times. So this one, I think I wanted to share again today. One second, I'm sorry. I think, yeah, let's just see this. It will come up. I don't know if this is first one. So equality is a very important part of this yoga. It is necessary to keep equality under pain and suffering. And this means to endure firmly and calmly, not to be restless or troubled or depressed or despondent, to go on in a steady faith in the divine will. But equality does not include inert acceptance. If, for instance, there is a temporary failure of some endeavor in the sadhana, one has to keep equality, not to be troubled or despondent, but one has to accept the failure as an indication of the divine will and give up the endeavor. You ought rather to find out the reason and meaning of the failure and go forward in faith towards victory. So, with illness, you have not to be troubled, shaken, or restless, but you have not to accept illness as the divine will. So, again, the paradox here that you have ill, but not to be troubled, shaken, or restless. But you have not to accept, again, this is something that we see very often, right? This passivity. So this is illness as a divine will, but rather look upon it as an imperfection of the body to be got rid of as you try to get rid of vital imperfections or mental errors. Because there's a very high chance we say that, if everything is done by the divine, oh mother, if you want me to be sick, I can be sick for you. That kind of thing can also be there. So one has to be important. And just a follow up on this, I really like this, that how Sri Aurobindo here says that all that one think one is, one can by the very fact of thinking become. And how in equanimity, in equality, he says that don't think anything, right? Just see how things are coming and passing through you and passing by you. So how I always want to make conclusions, right? Put limits, put boundaries, define things and stuff. But if one thing is obviously, the first step is to think positive, to think what I want to become, because that's what he says that, also from goal and choice of what one will be, of what, always you should see not what you are, but what you want to be. But just this thought came that what if there is nothing that comes to you? What a beautiful state it would be, because then you would become that nothing. Like just thinking out loud, I felt it was beautiful. So any reflections? I know I speeded it up quite fast in my excitement.
Hi. Hi everyone. So Taru, this part, the previous one about the equality, I can resonate with that in terms of just something that I have been trying to reflect on. And, where you're not, it's not about actually just, it's the living through pain or, it's, I think I see, I mean, these words obviously express it really well. But what's coming to mind is, you can grieve, but you don't have to suffer. And, or there's this other way of putting it, that the only way out of pain is through it. But it's with that quality of equality towards it, where you're not attaching, your ways of looking at that pain. You just no stories or no likes, dislikes, preferences, but you just live through it. And I suppose that's the way to not be restless or troubled or despondent. And so that's just something that I wanted to share, that it's something I've been reflecting on. Doing very badly with it, of course, at the moment. And so that's a different story, because the ego has I have my desires running high in terms of how I want things to be and what I want. So I don't have a connect with some of the other topics like surrender and aspiration at the moment. I'm struggling with just some of the other aspects. But yes, I can really resonate with this, where to live through it. And that's something I'm trying to work on. And the second part, which you just mentioned, I mean, there seems to be a paradox there, but it's still coming from a different place, is what I can only share. I mean, when I read it, when I think about it, it's not coming from a mental, sort of thought level idea of what one wants to be. I think it's slightly from a different space. Yeah. That's about it actually, for now, if that makes sense to you.
Yes, Sardaji, please. We have already I saw your message. Yes, please. Thank you.
Sorry, I've got a phone call, so I need to leave.
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye. See you all next week. Yeah.
Equanimity and equality, it's like, when I don't know, like, Swati, thank you so much for sharing and putting more light on it. But I mean, my possibility of having that equality or equanimity that's mentioned mostly in the text is just, it amazes me, because like you said, it's like such a big struggle, because every part of me wants to react or hold on or judge or be better than this kind of thing that's there. And just on this only, what I actually wanted to share, and something else had come up about equality, which was quite beautiful too. This is what I actually had taken out, but I scrolled down. It again says this, that equality means another thing. I don't know what I'm doing. Equality means a quiet and unmoved mind and vital. It means not to be touched or disturbed by things that happen or things said or done to you, but to look them with a straight face, free from distortions created by personal feelings, and try to understand what is behind them. Like, why did they happen? What do I learn from them? What is in it oneself which they are cast against? And so just these, just this line, that unmoved and quiet not to be touched or disturbed, but look at them with a straight face. Like, I think there's just so much just here, right? Just this possibility of this. This is a possibility that I can do that. Yeah. So I think, I don't know, I know it seems like we are ending at a quite, not at a very harmonious angle, but I think sometimes it's really good to just leave with, I don't know, more things to reflect on or aspire for, right? Like, yeah. So any ending comments, anything, and thank you so much for joining us this Friday, and yeah, thank you. Captain, you unmuted, but I didn't hear anything. In case you're sharing.
No, thank you. Thank you. Just wanted to say thanks.
Thank you, Captain.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, Taru.
Thank you.
Today was enjoyable.
Not my doing.